All right, it's the Tesla Beat podcast, week number 12. It's pretty insane that we've already hit number 12. We're going to be a little bit short staffed today, but the show must go on. So we actually have the Jeff Lutz and myself, and maybe Joe, the Prez. He'll be joining us potentially in a little bit, I know he's actually on the road to the zero emissions in Vegas with Tesla Club SoCal. I think the Las Vegas Club, and the Southern Arizona Club. So we'll be a little bit short-staffed, and obviously we know Elon Musk is on a live interview right now in France at Viva Tech. But again, I know that there's been several of you actually still waiting. So we thought we would just start a little bit later today. But with that said, we also have a special guest, probably a familiar face. Herbert runs an amazing show. It's actually a daily show that he provides just such a great resource to the community about really everything that's going on. If you're looking to track Tesla on a daily basis, it's a one-stop shop. So we'll get brighter with him today, and we'll actually bring him in. Herbert, how's it going?
Good morning, guys. I'm doing well, thanks.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for that intro. Appreciate
Yeah,
you.
of course. I feel like me personally, we always get brighter every time we spend time with you, especially with how closely you follow it. So as you're maybe a little bit familiar with the show, we typically talk about all of the latest topics, and we follow that. And we typically use a slide deck to kind of help capture all the major thoughts, but obviously would love to get your thoughts. So actually, looks like Joe's here. We'll see how. Hey Joe, what's up? It looks like your internet's back. So we'll see how well your internet is, but hopefully, you can stay pretty connected. But let's just get into it. I know we started a little bit late, so thank you to the viewers who held on. All right. Here's a quick snapshot of the stock.
Yes.
It's been insane. And the great thing is, as a long-term investor, like I personally, when it hit $101, I think it maybe even dipped below 100. I personally I wasn't worried personally at all. It was just a bummer, obviously, on the short term. But we're gonna get into some of the stuff where Herbert and actually, before people joined, the writing is now on the wall. People are starting to see that Tesla for what it is, and it's pretty insane to see the 57% growth this month. I remember actually 3 weeks ago I was talking to my wife. I was like, should we get some more at 200? And now it's at 260. So pretty insane. But yeah, and they also hit the 13-day streak of being in the green. So it's just been on a massive tear. But I don't know, any thoughts specifically on the stock? I know, again, I know probably Herbert, you probably follow it a little bit more closely. But
oh no, Jeff follows it like by the hour, Jeff.
Okay, I actually did not know that, so sorry about that. But any thoughts on the 13-day tear? Any things like big indicators? Obviously, there's been a lot. We obviously don't want to spoil the news for the rest of the show, but any specific thoughts on just the 13-day tear and kind of what we're seeing today?
I think it's a little bit of technicals meeting fundamentals at this point. And, we talked about it, on yesterday, right, Herbert? I think that show will come out later today. But I mean, just it's technicals meeting fundamentals. It's never really should have gotten as low as it did when you look at Tesla's forward earnings. And, I think right now we're in a place where the fundamental news is coming in at a good rate. We're now in this couple week period before the end of the quarter. So I liked the base that was created, in the 160 to 180 range. Excuse me, I was about to sneeze. And who knows? We could be forming another one here, and we'll see. But we got a lot of big news coming up. We've had a lot of big news over the last 6 weeks. We have a lot of big news coming up, specifically around tech, around deliveries. But I think the first half, you had a trough. It was kind of like, okay, we're resetting from a pricing perspective. We're adjusting to a post-COVID economy. where we want to be positioned for the growth that we've installed in our factories. And now I think a lot of people are going to be looking to the second half and really to 2024. If you're looking at the stock price, really start looking ahead in terms of new model introductions, growth, just growth in the overall business. And I think that's going to be more of the story than are we at 15.8% gross margin or 17% gross margin. I think we've seen a trough, and I think we're going to be looking ahead.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And obviously, as we know, literally, Elon's probably still on the interview. He's in France, and so with that, we know that he's meeting with some key
Mhm.
leaders. So he met with the Italy Prime Minister. He also met with the President of France. So I know that the President of France is pushing hard to get Gigafactory France. We know that I think it was about a week ago. There was some rumors of Giga Spain potentially.
Mhm. Mhm.
Obviously, there's Giga India and Indonesia. I mean, all of them are rumored, but I do know that there will probably be another factory in Europe. But what are your thoughts specifically on Italy and Spain? Italy, Spain, and even France. With some of the rumors, but obviously it seems like we're getting nearer and nearer potentially to, them making an announcement at least before the end of the year. But it seems pretty consistent, potentially the locations that they're suggesting that they may go to.
Yeah. I mean, so isn't it wonderful? Isn't it amazing that every world leader is reaching out, trying to get him to meet with them and vying for Tesla's business? This is the best you can possibly ask for. They're pitting each other against each other. Just this morning, just literally a few minutes ago, you might not have seen it, John, because you were just turning the show on. French President Macron came out and said, "Let's make a deal." Right? He just finished meeting with Elon. So, it's like all these guys are vying for it. So what that tells me is that Elon is already committed to creating another factory in Europe. And so every European country is saying, meet with me and let me tell you what kind of partnership, what kind of deals I can strike with you, do it in my country. And the reason why, we covered quite in depth today at a Cyberbull show that'll come out at 1 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. And the reason why they're doing this, I think, is because there's a concern that European Union is very, very afraid of the Chinese manufacturers coming in, and they're already setting base in Europe. And they have to protect their German auto manufacturers, the European auto manufacturers, because nobody's buying both the European and the American cars in China, and no one's buying them anymore. They're seeing sales fall in Europe themselves. And so what would happen when the Chinese manufacturers come in and they start selling like crazy in Europe, and it's going to be Tesla and Chinese. And so I think, Tesla wants to come in and create a second factory in Europe right now in case they do something like that, or negotiate with them to make sure that they're still able to sell. So I think that it's pretty clear that they're going to create a new factory in somewhere, and so they're all vying for it. And it might not be just a gigafactory; it could be mega pack factories. It could be other kinds of relationships too. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Herbert went through, and if you were able to put that photo up again, John, that you had of Elon with the world leaders, I think if you look at this, take this and multiply it by 1,000, because this is what's actually happening right now inside of Tesla with their supply chain and all of the suppliers that are reaching out to Tesla that want to make deals. They want to make, short-term, medium-term, long-term supply deals. Look at these heads of state. If it's happening at this level, I can tell you from experience that the noise level and the ferocity that they're basically beating down Tesla's doors is exponential, just based off of what's happened. If you look at his meeting schedule, he had this, and I study this. I've been a part of this in the past. The visibility of these meetings, the timing of these meetings, the order of these meetings, South Korea, Indonesia, South Korea, India, like all, there's a method to what's happening. and behind the scenes. And all I'll say is there's a reason for the order. There's a reason for the visibility. It's great. As Herbert said, it's great to see all these world leaders. Just look how big the smiles are on their face. And this whole point about like the protectionist economy that they need to have in the EU is very true. They're worried about all these Chinese EV startups and incumbents coming in and setting up, and they know it's going to happen. The question is like, what are you going to protect your economy from? Do you want these companies coming in and just multiplying, or do you want somebody like a Tesla who is going to come in and who is going to set up scale, but they're also going to be innovators, and they're going to be innovators that help not only create that gross domestic output for your country that you're in, but they're also going to leave you with the gift that keeps on giving, which is, innovation and that knowledge base that they will create in that workforce pool in that country. So long story short, what's happening with those world leaders is happening times 1,000. And just imagine the leverage Tesla has from a cost perspective, from a supply perspective. And if you think that they're going to be in some long-term cost, rut with what's happening, this thing is going to turn much faster. They're going to be able to take costs down much faster than I believe anybody thinks.
Jeff, can you actually remember a time where any other CEO from any other company in any other industry for the last 100 years who actually went around and met with this many world leaders? I mean, even Steve Jobs, I don't think did it. Bill Gates never did it. I can't think of somebody. Google. I mean, who else?
Yeah, the visits a couple of decades ago were different, and things were different with social media. But I'll tell you, I do agree though, Herbert. There's no CEO that is kind of the titan of an auto industry, space industry, communications with Starlink. I mean, there's so many things that if you were a head of state that you would want access to as time, because if you have these conversations, you're going to get some energy. We didn't mention, energy. So there hasn't really been a CEO that's showing the way. That's basically like could be within a decade, right? Leading in all these different categories. So if you're head of state, you want his time, and it's not only that you want to create that work output and that product in your country, but you actually want to show that your people, your population, that you're trying to bring in the best and brightest and biggest industries to kind of transform. He's viewed as high tech, next generation, and so yeah, there isn't a comparison, I believe.
Yeah, and also too, there's no one that I know of that has the same weight as he does to make a decision in a company, right? Because even Steve Jobs, again, I don't think he necessarily could make a decision on behalf of everybody to really just go and do something per se, but I could be wrong. I'm not a Steve Jobs expert, but the way Elon runs SpaceX, obviously, and Tesla, the amount of shares that he owns of the company, he can go in and just say, you know what, we're going to France. That's just what's going to be the decision. He doesn't necessarily need to get sign off from a bunch of stakeholders, specifically within his leadership team. But for him to be able to do this tour like this and have this much weight, I think it was Herbert that you mentioned too, is just to have all of these companies that he has behind him, to be able to bring that into your economy is definitely very attractive. And actually, one country I even forgot, he met with Mongolia as well. So there's just the tour.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just, names are just being lost because he's on this tour. And it's awesome to see. I think, well, the sad thing is that I feel like in the US, probably up until a week ago, it's still, Tesla has still been a company that's overlooked. But what you see across the world is people want this guy's time. They want Tesla to come into their country because they know how big of an impact it can make. And I think it was interesting that it was said too that, people realize that China is going to be setting up several things with their Chinese car companies potentially entering their countries. And really they need something like a Tesla or another car company to come in and continue to bring jobs. Actually, and I think I heard, shout out to Alexandra, I heard this, Tesla Boomer Mama. I think, what are your thoughts though in general on Tesla entering, let's say, France or Italy, just because of a lot of their, their really friendly work laws that really put it in favor of the worker? Because I think that that's the thing about, let's say, China, even Germans, especially when I've talked with Jan from Tesla Fix, and some others, just like all of the factories that they have set up until now are people that are going to work hard. And I think that that's probably the biggest thing, especially with the laws in France, and potentially, again, I'm not an expert out there, let alone I'm not European, but I just know it's very friendly towards the worker. And it's one of those things where if you're just going to be clocking in and out, especially if they're doing more than just, let's say, like production line workers, that's not going to be the Elon way. So, but again, I don't know. Maybe that's not something that he's even considering. But what are your thoughts potentially on just opening up another factory specifically in these countries that he's visiting?
I'll start. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeff.
How about you? Go, Jeff.
Oh, okay. No, I mean, Tesla is working on decisions today that will come to fruition at scale in a couple of years. So if you think about the product lines that they're working on, the Gen 3 platform, they're going to need to have way more capacity than what they have today. And it's not just the Gen 3 automobiles, it's also what they're doing with energy. And so you see these rounds of meetings that are occurring because his companies, he's reaching this inflection point of where he needs gigantic scale. It can't just be like a factory a year. So he's doing two things at the same time. He's working on the product so that you can get more output per square meter in those factories. And then he's like, I need more factories at the same time because we're going to be at capacity. So these are decisions. If you think about where will Tesla be building in a couple of years and what will they be building? They'll be building this automobile that's in, call it the mid $20,000 range without incentives. And then you think about all these government incentives all around the world to adopt EV. And there's there's examples in the US of where you can get a Model 3 now for, I guess, under, $10,000 to $15,000 with incentives. And just multiply that. Now they create a Gen 3 car. Just think of the capacity they're going to need. So they're going to need more Southeast Asia. They're going to need more in Europe. They're going to need more in North America. That's why you have Mexico. That's why you have this bake-off occurring between South Korea, Indonesia, India. And then it's why you have this other bake-off it's probably occurring in the European Union right now. And also he's got Twitter issues he's got to deal with in region as well. So he can leverage all of these things off of each other. It's pretty crazy when you actually think about it.
Seriously.
So if you're the European Union, like, are you going to cross him on these Twitter issues, knowing that, he could be setting up capacity there? So you have to think about the product line and the amount of capacity they're going to need. Sometimes people just think in today's terms and think of like 1.8 to 2 million to 2.5 million cars. But if you think a couple of years out and it's closer to 4 to 5 million, you'll see why they need all this additional capacity.
So, France, right? He just met with the France president, and then Alexandra Mertz, Tesla Boomer Mama, just wrote a Substack. So you should check that out. She did a full detailed
100%.
analysis of what is it like to do business in France. She herself lived there for a couple of decades. She herself started a business there.
Wow, that's awesome.
So she's warning, and she loves the country, but she's warning about you were talking about kind of the labor situation there and how efficient they are. And so my response to that is, you're correct, Alexandra, but I wouldn't be afraid because, first of all, I put my trust in Elon and Tesla. They're not dumb. They know the labor laws. They know the productivity issues. They know this inside out. They wouldn't make a decision like doing a gigafactory in France without having considered that. So first of all, they're executives, and I put that's why I hired them with my investments. But secondly, the other thing that this is a little bit farther out for some people, but not to me. If you remember that Tom Ju said that when they're building Giga Nueva Leon in Mexico, that they're going to have 10,000 employees and they're going to have 5,000 bots. As you know, these gigafactories, they're headed to the point where they're full dreadnought robotic, and there's going to be less and less need for humans and just management of the bots. So, again, that's just, I don't think it's as far away as you think it is, but it's just something that you have to remember that, at some point, the bots will make bots, right? That's the goal that they're working towards. And so it may not be as big of a deal. But anyways, they're not going to do it. They're just negotiating with each other.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Herbert. And it's just one of those things where that's at the end of the day, we know that this team at Tesla is one of the best leadership teams on the planet. I mean, I can't speak to like what you can just say alone about SpaceX and that team with Gwyneth running it and the day-to-day. And obviously Elon had to focus on Twitter the past 6 to 7 months, whatever, to literally stop Titanic from like sinking. And his leadership showed up, and at Investor Day, there's just a lot happening. And so I definitely think that the leadership team will look at the pros and the cons. And then also too, Elon's going to be weighing in, okay, well, if this is going to benefit SpaceX, Twitter, Starlink somehow, they're going to probably somehow package a lot of that together. So it's just that, when you're talking with Elon, you're talking with 6, 7 companies. You're not talking with the CEO of just like one thing, but you're also, the insane thing is that he's also has a lot of power with a lot of the suppliers and the supply chain and a lot of the businesses that they bring along with them. And so he's going to pick the best country that is going to benefit probably his whole plethora of companies. It's not going to just be, maybe necessarily what's best for one specific company. Obviously, Tesla's the biggest player probably in this discussion. But if there's going to be potentially some benefit for Twitter in that case, I think that could be potentially even part of the discussion. But I do think, again, agreeing with you, Herbert, is like, that's ultimately what we're doing is we are putting our faith in leadership. And I think that's what was also interesting about the past 6 to 7 months where investors were not happy and they were raising their hand and saying, hey, we want some change. But ultimately, I think, with Elon back with a new CEO of Twitter. I think this is her second week that she's ending. So shout out to Linda. We just know that, he is more focused on Tesla, but we also realize how he breaks up his day. I believe it was a recent interview. He splits it up. Like he'll spend half a day on Tesla, half a day on SpaceX, the next day on Twitter, but then he'll probably weave in Twitter throughout the, different parts of the day. So he's prioritizing ruthlessly. We know he's doing that, but I think that his team is going to do their DD, their due diligence. They're not going to leave any stone unturned. You can have that faith just because we see it. We've seen it. Jeff, do you want to chime in?
I was just going to say,
Herbert.
I was just going to say really quick, don't forget about regulators in Europe and the FSD, and then also Twitter as well. Yeah. Like that, like he can, like, first off, we don't know the timing of when he needs to make this, Giga Europe decision. But if I were in his position, and I know he's a very smart negotiator, he needs to extract a lot in this relationship. And if you read Alexander's Substack, you'll see like the difficulties of manufacturing in that country. So Macron is a leader in the EU. He's the one that's been really pushing a lot of these protectionist policies against Chinese imports, which could also influence what Tesla does with Shanghai in Europe. So all this kind of plays together, but just don't forget about FSD. Don't forget about all the Twitter EU saga that's happening and the implications of these meetings.
The thing I wanted to point out is that when it's not just about Tesla, as you were saying, right? You triggered that thought, John. When Tesla decides to put a gigafactory in a country, there are all of these different suppliers who have to set up their base within and around that gigafactory. So in Giga Nueva Leon, an article came out that I showed about a month ago, 21 companies who were suppliers to Tesla increase their investments by hundreds of millions of dollars, in some cases $1 billion, And then just a few days ago, a week ago, Tesla apparently reached out to the Chinese manufacturers, a Chinese supply chain that supplies Giga Shanghai, and asked them to set up shop in around Mexico, Nuevo Leon. So you're not going to go and build a gigafactory in France with poor labor laws, and then Elon and Tesla is going to suffer from that because you're going to have to also build supply chain. Not all of them will be obviously needing to be in France, but they need to be close enough. And so it's a bigger picture. It's a huge benefit to the country, and that's why they're vying for this.
Yeah, I think it's ultimately going to come down to if the countries are similar, even in labor laws. Again, I'm not sure. Maybe one's worse than the other. I did retweet Alexander's Substack. But, let's say there's one that's worse than the other. I think it's ultimately going to come down to who edges out the other, right? Is Italy closer to suppliers that are already established around, or is it France? Maybe because it helps a little bit with Twitter, along with some of the other things. Again, maybe there's more suppliers in there, but I know that as Herbert, I feel like I should quote him. It's just more like, we put our money behind this leadership team. They're going to make the right decision, and obviously, if they make the wrong decision, we'll let them know. So that's part of our job as investors, and ultimately, who has been in charge of Tesla, right? Well, awesome. I think so. Yeah, that's been big news, obviously. And then, again, the dominoes continue to fall. Last week, the week before, we had Ford. 2 weeks ago, probably, Ford announced, hey, we're adopting NACS, which is the Tesla standard. They also made they're also tapping into the Tesla supercharger network, which is 12,000 strong in the US. And what happened literally the following week, every major charging company is coming out. And actually one I think that's missing from here is even ChargePoint. But you have Blink Charging, shout out to them, EVgo, NLX, and then even car companies, Stenolatis. I'm probably saying that wrong. But I would expect more and more car companies, especially, whether it's Rivian, Lucid, they're going to have to move over, because some of these charging stations at some point, because if you actually think of the amount of EVs probably on the road, it's really small compared to where we're headed in the next 5 to 10 years. So I doubt that they're going to continue to maintain, because some of these, obviously, as we know, these charging stations, they have two different slots. Some of them are slower, some of them are faster. So they're not going to be maintaining 4 at one site per stall, right? We know that they're probably going, or they're going to adopt the NACS, and then you need to buy an adapter the other way around. But all that to say is that this is kind of, again, Herbert and I were talking a little bit before we hopped on to this call. It's truly impressive just to see. I think the world is starting, really North America, because North America has been the country that has really overlooked Tesla, I think, the most. Not only the current administration, but really the companies here, really a lot of the news and mainstream media have really hit Tesla hard over these past really 5 to 6 years, especially since I've been in the community. So I love it. Like, I think it's just, this kind of more feels like this is a huge milestone and turning point, I believe, for Tesla, even though we all who have been following this for a very long time. Jeff, I think you're probably, at least as far as this podcast today, you're the longest here. And so it's just one of those things where it's, or maybe I'm mixing it up, but
no, we should find out, Jeff. We should find out.
Yeah. When did you start investing in Tesla?
Like 10 years ago. Okay. 10 years ago. Yeah.
But I'm 2012. 10 years ago is 2013. So
okay. Yeah. So maybe it's Herbert. But yeah,
well,
it's just one of those.
We want to keep, hey, let's keep going.
What do you mean?
Well, I was in a Tesla factory in 2012.
Oh yeah. Okay,
taking a walk around.
Fine.
I'll leave it there.
I was dabbling.
Yeah.
You were like serious.
But I believe
no. Yeah, it's been a while for both of us. So but yeah, it's great. There's other people too that have been following Amy's been following the company
since I
IPO. All of us.
So yeah, there's a community here that's been literally following this for a long time, both the technology and the financial aspect.
Yeah, you know, and it's just one of those things where I think it was actually in 2012. I think I put out a tweet the other night. Shout out to Omar from Holmar's blog. He put the video online, but I think I took it and quote tweeted it. But long story short, 2012 will be seen as the year where Tesla, they announced the supercharger network, and that's going to be a huge moment in history when you look at you know, if you look at back at the Ford and all their huge announcements, there's certain milestones, but specifically for the EV space, 2012 will be the time where Tesla announced the supercharger network. And what did they do? They did it. Elon responded to one of my tweets, and what did he say? He said it's because they did it out of desperation and no one else would do it. And that's even why they started the lithium refinery and all these other things that they're doing. It's because no one else will start it. But that will be seen as, you know, kind of the announcement of all announcements when it comes to the charging situation that they had, and knowing that the biggest issue with adoption is going to be having a stable charging network. So, but yeah, did you have any thoughts or any perspective that you thought on all of these announcements that just happened? It was just like one after the other, all kind of on the same day.
Yeah. I've got a question for Jeff, going back to that, the previous conversation, but regarding superchargers, it's funny that Volkswagen came out and said, we're still thinking about it. It's like, we're still thinking about it. What is it to think about? It's over, dude. It's over. So what does this mean, right? I think it's way bigger than, I mean, obviously us in the Twitter community, we realize this, and we can see the community in the news and the industry understanding how big of a deal this is. But I think it's even bigger than that. It's not just, I've heard numbers pulled out that this is going to be a $3 billion business by 2030. The latest number I just saw somebody calculate is $5 billion. But it's not just the amount of money, right? It's just strategically. And I think the biggest deal is that what this requires, what this will force, is every auto manufacturer will have to have a master service agreement with Tesla and be able to have their software teams working with Tesla's software team to integrate the supercharger app into their app. And so it becomes a hop, skip, and a jump to add other features as we move along. I mean, I think it's a huge deal as somebody who's made, you know, partnerships. I know Jeff, that's his career. He's done that. So yeah, why don't you, if you want to, when you end this conversation, I've got a new one to ask Jeff.
Oh, sorry. I thought that was a question for Jeff. Maybe not.
Okay, no, I mean, if you guys don't have any more supercharger stuff, let me ask Jeff. Okay, Jeff, you ready for this?
Yeah, do it.
Yeah,
Ready.
okay. All right, Jeff. So, do you know who Andrea James is?
Yes.
Okay, go. Tell me.
Financial analyst.
Wow. Okay. So, Andrea James is the original and the most important, I guess, you know, the most earliest Tesla bull. She's a financial analyst that was working for Dougherty and Company. She was the first to give Tesla a buy rating in 2011, 2012. So I just interviewed her, and I'm going to drop that interview in Sunday. Yeah. And she then ended up working for Tesla as investor relations. But when you watch in those times, 2011, 2012, 2013, she was the person going on, you know, the CNBC and all these different shows. She was in every show defending her reasons why she thinks Tesla is going to be a success of a company. And it's hilarious because we're going to show clips of these shorts and people who just can't understand how Tesla is going to succeed. And she just knocks it out of the park one after another. And it's hilarious how, you know, we think we have it tough in 2018, 2020. I know, John, you were a big reason, you know, that's how you came on board fighting the FUD that was happening in 2018 and onward. But imagine what it was like in 2012. It was worse, and she was it. Yeah.
No, it was an amazing time because you didn't know if it was actually going to stick. Like you didn't know, like you just didn't know. But I was introduced to the company in 2012, but I think, yeah, Herbert, if you were investing earlier than that, then you started at least financially earlier. in terms of making that commitment. But I was introduced to the company, and then I was introduced to the car kind of in succession. And then it was 1, 2, and then 3 for me to make an investment decision pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, it's all around.
Did you buy the car?
Same. I bought it the day I test drove it in early 2013.
So I did not buy the car, but and so then I just invested. My friend bought the car, and 3 years later, he's going, damn, I shouldn't have bought the car. I should have invested instead.
Yeah, true. I did both. I test drove it on a Saturday, and then Monday, after I test drove on Monday, I'm like, I'm there's nothing like this. It's a buy. So, and that's where it started.
Have you guys heard those memes or something that says, if you did not buy the first iPod, instead invested that in Apple? Like, damn.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the balance, right? I mean, even now, right? Like, would you go buy another, 50 if you already have a Tesla, going and buying the latest one? Obviously, I'm hoping to buy a Cybertruck towards the end of the year or whenever my reservation number comes up. But that's always the thing, right? It's like, should I invest or should I buy? But back in
you should buy. Yeah.
2012,
you should buy, of course. You need a car, right? You need to buy. I'm just kidding a little bit, of course, but it was kind of funny.
Yeah, and speaking of the Cybertruck, there were some sightings. I feel like whenever I see these, they're literally like 30 minutes away from my house, and I'm like, what am I doing in my house? I should be out there, but obviously I'm stuck at home, doing meetings and working and stuff. But in Palo Alto, I was actually seen going through an in and out. They put a camo on it. If you actually look at the road, it almost looks kind of like I think Elon joked it looks invisible, but this is what happened when we started seeing the Model Y. When the Model Y was going to come out in production, I was seeing them all over the place. And obviously this, there's only so many probably of these prototype Cybertrucks, but all that to say is that it's becoming more and more common to see them, especially around the Bay Area, especially if you're in the Mountain View, Palo Alto area. So it's going to be very cool as they start to ramp this. We get into Q3, Q4, and whenever they have the launch event, it's going to be really exciting. I can't be more excited to see these on the road. And it's just funny. Obviously, you're not seeing people see them in the Austin area. Obviously, it's probably because the engineering headquarters is here. But I don't see people posting these in Austin, even though they're going to build them there.
Yeah. I don't know how Ryan from the Kilowatts, we got to give a shout out for him. I don't know how he gets all these incredible videos. I don't know where he's going around spotting them, but he's the one.
It's a great job.
These things. It's amazing. Do you guys, obviously this is amazing. This is great marketing. And if I read way too much into this, is this kind of like a message that the military is going to be the number one buyer of the Cybertruck? I mean, the military alone will buy 1 million of these, right?
Yeah,
I think it will be.
Go for it, Jeff.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I think this is a little bit of a joke of like, hey, let's camouflage it so nobody knows like what it is, but it's so like its structure is so unique. Yeah. It's Cybertruck. But I think that's kind of the joke. But I think you are onto something, Herbert. I think this will be a government and military vehicle. Again, we haven't heard the specs of like how this performs, crash testing, in terms of how it performs off-road. Like this thing could have amazing specs. So I think there's some really fun surprises in store for this product once they actually have the launch event.
Yeah, I personally can't wait. It's gonna just change the look of the road, but also too, it's them doing this is not unnormal. They did we actually work with a wrap shop. They did all of the original wraps for Veterans Day. I believe it was like 2013 to 2015. A lot of those old pictures you'll see of the Model S, they did the original wrap for those. So I'm gonna have to I should probably text the owner of SS Customs and see if they did this wrap. But they definitely have done wraps in camo before, specifically to show support for veterans and those in service. But I could see them definitely switching out the Hummers and doing a Cybertruck. It would make sense, especially if they can figure out a deal to make that happen. One thing I actually wanted to get into next was, and actually one of them is one of your tweets, Jeff. I think you may have shared it, or Joe put it in. But obviously, as we know, there's been this huge rally over the past 3 weeks, 13 straight days of just 13 straight days of positive green for Tesla going. Again, I remember asking my wife about buying in at 200 3 weeks ago. It's at 260 now. It's had a I believe like something like a 50% run, 56% run, whatever I showed at the beginning of this. And obviously Tesla Q is just losing their mind right now, over 13 billion in losses since the beginning of the year. And specifically, Jeff, getting some love from Elon, and specifically from this one video. But I don't know if you want to speak to that or get your thoughts on what it's been like over the past 3 weeks, specifically for Tesla Q and the short sellers.
I just think the general point here is the FUD level. As Tesla, this has been a pretty steep rise, and as that continues, as it even stabilizes or continues, you're going to see that FUD, the knob on the FUD, go to 11, which is it's on its way. This is just a point of just in the media, just they pop in randomly midday. This particular network was just saying hey, if you look at the technical indicators, you should not be buying any more Tesla. It's just a weird thing to single out. It wasn't a show talking about stocks. It was a new kind of like a news break-in, talking about technical levels on Tesla, but not doing the same thing when Nvidia and other stocks were making that run. So yeah, the FUD level is going to be high. The short interest is of the highest of the mega caps, and it's pretty high, and it's high in terms of total dollar value. But as a percent of float, I think it's about 3.5%. So it's not like it's 20% of the float is shorted, but it is higher in dollar value than any other mega cap. So that is somewhat meaningful. I think the option flow and activity drives a lot of the price action on Tesla, and of course the fundamentals and technicals.
Yeah, Herbert, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a simple investor. I don't do shorts. I would never do shorts. I don't understand who anybody would do shorts. And what confuses me the most is, I can see the people saying, hey, Apple is an all-time high. Tesla is an all-time high. This is frothy. I'm going to short it now. I don't understand the people who's going to short Tesla in January when it's like a all-time low at 100 or 100, whatever it was, and they think it's going to keep falling down further. It's what? And if you're going to short a company, why would you short the one that has the most potential, that any day they have this brand new technology that they release, that they've proven now for 15 years that they can do things? I just would never touch that company, because you just never know. I'd short a company that I know that the financials are wonky. There's the market share possibly might slow down. The competition might come up, and then they're overpriced. I just can't understand somebody would ever short a technology company, specifically one that is proven that they're so successful. I personally, it's like, what? This one of all the companies in the world, you're going to put it on arguably the best entrepreneur in the history of the world? I mean, okay, if some people say he's not number one, obviously we all think he is, but let's say that he's number 10. You still put your bet on that? I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, personally, I don't know how you can ultimately, especially with where they are, even in January, even if he was just super distracted, which I think, he definitely was giving a lot of time to Twitter, but as the stock was going down, and he even admitted too that he didn't know how much Twitter was going to cost, and he regretted, now looking back, he regrets selling that additional stock in December, because he just didn't know how bad things were going to be at Twitter long term. And I think they're potentially at least at break even potentially now, or that's still ongoing. But I personally, especially with even where Tesla was back in January, this car is just months away from becoming the best-selling car, the Model Y. Obviously, that was only one quarter, but it's probably going to be the best-selling car for the year. A lot of the stuff just doesn't make sense. And, obviously too, I don't want to have to watch, the highs and the lows. It's one of those things where, as partially you were saying, Herbert, it was just finding companies and things that you believe in. I mean, Elon even says that, just, becoming an expert in that space and then putting your dollars there. Right. And obviously I know a lot of us follow this company pretty in depth. And so the big thing is that you're able to also look at the competitors. What are the competitors doing? But in the past week, it's the exact opposite. All of the competitors are now doing what Tesla has been doing, because they're on like their 100th iteration of the NACS, their supercharger stalls. I think they're on V3. They've already launched V4 in Europe, but they're already thinking of V5, V6, along with their product roadmap that's going to inform the charge rates and the capabilities that they need. So it doesn't make sense. And so it's who knows if Bill Gates is still shorting this company, but it's just one of those things where, especially now, like even if you look at Twitter where it was 6-7 months ago to where it's at now, they're putting out more. Again, Elon is a software guy. People think he's just like, it's really funny how people will just label him as a manufacturer and hardware guy. No, this guy made Zip 2. He made his first game, sold it for $500. He sold Zip 2 to PayPal. And it's just one of those things where it's just one of those things. He's by trade a software guy initially. He became a hardware guy, manufacturing and all that stuff. But this company, Twitter or X, has put out more updates and changes in the past 6 months than they did the previous 6 years, with 20% of the workforce, mind you. When everyone thought this company was going to die, I remember all those posts like, "Hey, if this Twitter dies, here's my link tree. Follow me on all these things." But it's just one of those things where hopefully people will just get the writing on the wall and continue to stop betting against this. The greatest entrepreneur in the world, as Governor Abbott said so just weeks ago at the lithium refinery. But yeah, I think, so one other thing I wanted to mention, and then I know we just are at the top of the hour. Tesla is on the offensive again, just continuing to put out stats. And this is something like, we've never seen. It's just one of those things where I think the general news, whenever I talk to friends, oh, my Teslas are expensive. They still think it's this premium luxury vehicle, and they think it's something that they can't afford. But Tesla put out this tweet, I believe it was yesterday. And when you factor in all of the costs, including incentives, when you're looking at the first 5 years, 60,000 miles, the Model 3 comes in at 43 cents per mile versus the Corolla. And the funny thing is, this is the car that they, I guess this is the 3 versus the Y, but Teslas are putting out the number one selling car. And it's just crazy that they're also now beating out the most efficient cars out there. Because before I had a Tesla, the cars that I was buying is, Toyotas and Hondas, because they were reliable, low maintenance, the labor costs weren't high. I wasn't paying for like a BMW or Porsche to just go get these insane rates per hour just to get my car serviced. But they're continuing to, put out information that I think the general public doesn't know. So I think this is good to see. Obviously, I haven't seen the advertising quite yet, as far as like, them spending money per se quite yet. Maybe it's already been happening and they've been testing it out, but they're definitely doing a good job of at least informing the audience. And unfortunately, I think the audience that they're informing are probably already owners or people that know about Tesla. But this is probably the biggest fake news out there, is thinking that Teslas are these premium cars that you can't afford. When you look at the first 5 years, it's the cheapest car to pretty much own when you think of maintenance. But any thoughts, Jeff or Herbert, on this stat?
Yeah, I think the service is totally undervalued, underestimated. It is massive, the service savings. That's the reason why I invested in Tesla, is because once you understand that there's no engine and there's no parts required, and you have a frunk instead. People are so concerned about range anxiety. I've never had an issue with range anxiety for electric vehicles, but I tell you what I have massive service anxiety for all of my ICE gas cars that I've ever owned. I've owned everything from Toyota, Volvo, BMW, every single one of them. You eventually bring it in. And what is the business model of the dealerships? To make a ton of money on the service and the parts. And we're talking thousands of dollars. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Whatever you say. I have no idea. I'll take it to another shop. It doesn't matter. They all say the same amount. Thousands of dollars. And so don't tell me, and every time I've seen these total cost of ownership, I always look at the service component, and it's just, what? I will not have to bring my Tesla for service. There's no parts needed to be replaced, and I can name you 700 parts within a car and an ICE car, gas car, that will need to be replaced at some point. And you're just, every day, you're just worried that if I turn on the car, is it going to even turn on? And then is there going to be a part that's going to be, worn out by today? And then there's a couple $1,000s out the door, just that alone. So yeah, it's a big relief in my head that I don't have to worry about service for Teslas. And that alone is worth, I don't know, $5,000 extra if I needed to. But right now with price parity, I'm saving tons of money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are parts inside of a Tesla, but I get your point. There's a dramatic difference in the number of parts and really the rate that I wish there was more public information on this, because all the FUD that we see on like Tesla and services like, panel gaps or things like that, or these one-off like wonky things. Remember, we're in this age of social media where everything that wants to get amplified can get amplified. But I would bet you, just based on my ownership experience, that it's just very rare that, my service events are like, I'm in the Midwest, like swapping tires and things like that. It's not like, hey, my car doesn't work. So yeah, this cost per mile thing is a big deal. The issue is it's very difficult, whether it's Tesla or any company, to actually communicate that and actually get it across of like, oh, this is the lowest total cost of ownership. Like, total cost of ownership is not the easiest concept for everyone to just absorb. They want to like, look, what am I paying? What am I driving out the door with? So I would say the challenge for Tesla, I think the stat is great. And it's really, to me, it's a product of their engineering and their manufacturing that they have that. The question is like, how do you meaningfully get the word out? So it's not just the Tesla Twitter community that sees this, or people that follow the Tesla its channel. It's really broad. It's on billboards. It's on ads. It's everywhere. I think that's the challenge for Tesla. Like, all the hard engineering work they've done, whether it's FSD 6 times more, it's more safer than human driving, or whether it's just cost per mile. But then how do you get the word out in mass scale?
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not like you're advertising the car or like, look at how cool this car is. You're just advertising the stats of these cars and like what makes these cars amazing. Safety, obviously the autonomy, the cost of ownership, the low maintenance, all of those things. But either way, I just wanted to, I know we started a little bit late, so thank you for the viewers just tuning in and hanging with us. Obviously, we knew Elon Musk was on the Viva Tech, so make sure you check that out. But I just want to give a quick shout out to our special guest today, Herbert. So he runs a channel on YouTube, Brighter with Herbert. So obviously go check out his channel. I'll update the description and make sure that, he gets his love as well, but just make sure to check him out. So thank you for joining us today, Herbert.
Thank you. Loved it. That was fun.
Thanks, Herbert.
And obviously Jeff, our regular host as well. So he's at the Jeff Lutz on Twitter. You can follow him. He really just gives some amazing information and knowledge, specifically, obviously focused on the supply chain and really everything else. But a huge Tesla bull, just, Tesla fan. He's been following the company for a very long time. So make sure you obviously follow him and obviously Herbert. But thank you for tuning in for this week's Tesla Beat podcast. We'll be back next Friday at 8 a.m. So thanks for tuning in and have a great week, everyone.